I have found building relationships to be a common denominator for success.
And then I explained it to him, and he said, let me get this straight. You're going to convince doctors who sell glasses to send patients to a doctor who takes them out of glasses?
The patient is referred in for a surgery. I want to do the very best in that consultation to figure out should they have surgery or not.
It's helpful because they're not just getting a text. They can hear the inflection in your voice and that you care.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Free Range Vision. I'm Matt Jensen alongside Dr. Vance Thompson. And for nearly 2 decades, we've been pioneering in practice, business, and team leadership. We'll cover everything from the pivotal lessons we've learned to the formidable challenges we've overcome and sometimes lost to, providing you with the essential tools to steer your journey and empower your team as you venture together. So whether you're at the helm of a practice or simply striving to cultivate a stronger culture, well, you found your flock. Let's venture off the beaten path together. Welcome to Free Range Vision.
Well, Vance, it's good to have you back here on Free Range Vision. And we've been talking about a lot of things that business leaders and doctors want to know about their practice. And today we're going to talk about practice development. There's a couple of different ways we can look at it. Practice development means, business development, how you're going to grow the program, but it also means, especially in ophthalmology, how we work collaboratively with primary eye care. So just give us a little bit of an overview of your philosophy on practice development, collaborative care over the last, 20, 30 years of your career.
Well, for me, it's one of my favorite topics, the idea of how do we grow a practice so we can have a healthy practice and be able to, give the team the best salaries and benefits and helps their families and have the best technology and on down the line. So, and I made a decision, early in my career that I wanted to have a surgical emphasis in my practice. I knew that, at least for me, I felt if I was doing lower volume surgery, I wouldn't have the same confidence as higher volume. And so I knew, if I did something a lot, I was going to get really good at it and feel good about it. And again, be able to afford, doing the best for my team and best technology for my patients and on down the line. And so that means working with area eye care providers. And so, for me, that meant, really understanding, my craft and being able to go out and talk about it and develop relationships. In any business, you want great relationships with your team. You want great relationships with your customer. In our world, it's the patient.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want great relationships with the people that can influence your business. And whether that was other, optometrists or ophthalmologists in the region, whether that was industry, whether, it was people that were startups looking to develop their technology, I have found building relationships to be a common denominator for success.
Well, it's interesting. I remember when I was just getting ready to leave the marketing firm that I was at and getting ready to join you, I had mentioned to one of my clients that I was going to wear 3 hats. One was going to be in charge of day-to-day operations. One was going to be in charge of the marketing. And one was going to be in charge of the practice development. And then I explained it to him and he said, let me get this straight. You're going to convince doctors who sell glasses to send patients to a doctor who takes them out of glasses. And you had already kind of coached me through, yes, that's precisely what we're going to do. I mean, tell me your rationale and how you get to that conclusion, because I think it's helpful for people to hear that while that sounds like it would be a foreign topic or a threatening topic, it's actually a real value add for that primary eye care provider, especially if they want to keep their patients happy.
Well, and that's really what it's all about, what you just said. I mean, I consider myself a public servant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working for my patients and the people who come in to see me and us. And so you're always trying to figure out, what is in their best interest. And even in our education, we talk about, hey, glasses are great. Contact lenses are great. And even some of the other alternatives going on in the world of vision correction, like orthokeratology or presbyopia correcting drops.
Mm.
And then we get into the surgical realm, which is, what I love. And so when I go talk with doctors that, fit glasses and contact lenses, I talk about it in that way. I'm a big fan of what they do. I remember in the second grade, even though I had great vision, I tried to flunk my eye exam so I could wear glasses. I thought they looked cool. And so now I help people see without them. But at the same time, I have a lot of respect for, all those ways to correct vision. And so I think that's one of the most important things when you go into any relationship with the sincere goal to do the best for the patient. And so some patients have tried glasses and they then try contacts and they love that full field vision and they love the look. And then sometimes contacts get tough and they love hearing about those surgical alternatives, such as laser vision correction, or, they're having troubles with their image quality or their reading range, and they're now, looking into lens replacement. So it's very complementary what optometry and ophthalmology can do together, and we need each other. We have this growing patient population that neither one of us can do alone, and we do a beautiful job together.
Well, and I think early on, we looked at it as if it was almost a regional condition of what we do. I mean, patients are coming from a few hours away. After they have surgery, they're going to need some kind of aftercare or to find a way to drive to our town from a few towns over. That can be a real barrier to good quality aftercare. So educating the primary eye care provider about what to look for in their healing and how to share in that care, because that's really where the patient's home is really important. So, I think that it makes just a ton of sense. It's grown now to where people, some practices really feature themselves and promote the fact that they work closely with MD offices, and are a great conduit of getting patients there. And patients are going to ask about the newest and greatest things. And so I think that as primary eye care providers, they can either take part in that education process or those patients are going to go somewhere else where they are because the market, is dictating some of that. I'd like to transition a little bit to talking about how you communicate with primary eye care providers, because you've had education over the years. You've done symposia, you do little mini fellowships, as well as just going and speaking at their offices or with their staff or at their state meetings. Give us a sense or an overview of, how often do you want to educate and share in that collaborative care? And when are you done?
Well, frequency really matters in any relationship where you truly and sincerely care. You don't just do it every now and then. There is a rhythm, to a relationship. And so, I and we like to make sure we're stopping by offices, at least monthly, and we're sending out information, doing newsletters and working on things like that at least quarterly, and then doing sometimes virtual seminars, and then we do in-person seminars. We have one where we invite people from all over the country that we do in a nice convention center, and then we do things that are smaller, that are in our office. And we, also with patients that we see that have another doctor, we make sure and communicate well with them about what we found. And some of the things I like to do is send the topography that made my decision, or, send the high order aberration analysis that led to that implant, and then explain how we think. And so there's just all these opportunities to be able to educate and learn together. And what also happens when you do that is that they do that for you too.
Mm-hmm.
They
Two-way
learn,
street.
that's exactly right. They learn things that you want to teach me about, or they learn something at one of their meetings, or there's a good communication going on even about that patient's expectations, a text here, or an email there, and so it's just a beautiful way to do things. One of the things I love to do is send voice messages. And I find that if they're busy in clinic, I say, no problem. I'll try back later. And sometimes I'll send a voice message and text it, and they write back and they're like, you know what? Thank you. I just don't have many people do that. And I really see how you were thinking now.
Well, and it's helpful because they're not just getting a text. They can hear the inflection in your voice and that you care.
Yeah.
So that, for all kinds of reasons, that's a powerful way to communicate. The thing I like about the ongoing education, and I ask these questions knowing some of the answers because we participated in it together.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing you do for your own team.
Right.
The same kind of education, the same kind of staff retreats. Sometimes you pull off to a convention center and hold a big meeting for everybody because we want everybody's level of professionalism about our craft to increase.
Right.
Anybody who touches the patient needs to have a certain amount of time committed to the advancing of that offering.
Right.
And I just love that that's core to the way you and your program have committed to it. Now, the other thing that I just like to talk about is that because you've said this before, that you want both surgical eye care and clinical eye care to both operate to the very tip top of their training.
Right.
Right. And so what that sometimes means is that, boy, patients could do their aftercare with us. There's a few visits. But they can also do that with an optometrist. And first and foremost, it is the patient's decision, right? But a lot of times that's the primary eye care provider's bread and butter, is to kind of do some of that aftercare and see them on to their optical or whatever they have in their ongoing offering to the patient. Meanwhile, in that same amount of time, you could have seen a couple more surgical candidates. And so in a time where we're really worried about access to specialists in eye care because of baby boomers and things like that, I think it's really important to have a collaborative approach where everybody's operating to the top of their game, and surgeons are trying to do as much surgery as possible and getting the things that optometry can do to them so they can do the top of their game as much as possible, and we can open up more spots for more patients to be seen.
Well, that's my philosophy. And, everybody, gets to kind of set up their journey the way they want. But I chose that I didn't want to do anything routine that someone else could do well. And I want to explain a little bit what that means, because, for instance, right now, it takes a while to get into me for surgery. And if I didn't have this philosophy, it would take longer. So when someone has an established relationship with another doctor, I have a lot of respect for that, whether it's an MD or an OD, whether it's an ophthalmologist or an optometrist. I respect that relationship. And so when the patient is referred in for a surgery, I want to do the very best in that consultation to figure out, should they have surgery or not? If they are going to have surgery, what technology is best for them? And that do they understand their situation well, including risks and benefits? And so that takes time. One of the most important things is to not have a patient feel hurried. And it really helps as a doctor if you enjoy that conversation, and I enjoy patient education, and then I enjoy delivering a great surgery. But as far as aftercare, what I talk about not doing anything routine, if someone's comfortable with their doctor going back to them and they're doing great, that's a routine situation that I can allow to carry on just fine without me. Now, I do like documentation sent back so I can keep a complete patient record. That's important.
And so you can build your nomogram on how to fine tune things even more so in the future.
No, that's exactly right. But also, a couple examples of non-routine would be, one, if someone is concerned or scared or just really wants to see me, even if they're doing great, I consider that non-routine. That I want them to be able to see me, to bring them inner peace until I can make that handoff and their heart and mind are happy.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens with a philosophy like this, you not only can deliver good quality surgery because you're doing it at a volume that keeps your skills really sharp, but you can take care of those 10% of patients that aren't going routine. Because I think that what separates a good from a great doctor is taking those 10% that aren't going routine and doing everything in your power to have them end up in a good place. And so I like to be able to focus on those situations where I can use my expertise to shepherd them to a good outcome.
Well, and that's where it's so important to have a good team,
Yeah.
right? Because that primary eye care provider really wants that from you as well to help
Right.
bring that patient all the way into the end zone
Right.
with their desired outcome.
Yep. To close the loop.
Yep. I want to just ask you, it sounds like a lot of work, to communicate with all these referring and co-managing providers. You talked about visits, you talked about education, seminars, webinars. What's the minimum? If I just want to do just a little bit of that, what's the bare minimum?
Well, I don't know why this analogy popped into my head, but what's the minimum to having a good family? I
Well,
mean,
I that's the reason I asked you,
Yeah.
because I knew the question would just bug you.
yeah, and it really, if you're meant to do what you're doing, you enjoy what you're doing. And, if your kids are, you're not hearing from them, you're checking on them and you're texting, you're calling, you're making sure everything's okay. And the same thing with your practice, whether it's your team or the people you work with that are, in other practices, or, whether it's your patients. If you're meant to be doing this, you enjoy and you feel a sense of responsibility
Right.
to keep those communication lines open. And so for me, there's a natural energy to want to do that. And so I don't even know the phrase bare minimum,
Right.
because I'm going to scratch that itch until it's taken care of, and I'm going to close the loop on those situations, and as much as they're going to let me,
Mhm.
because I love what I do.
Well, it's so much like some of your initial comments on our earlier podcasts, our earlier sessions, when you said that you're not patient first as much as you're team first. And
Yeah.
because you're team first, that makes everybody on the team patient first, which is more powerful. Well, this is just an extension of that.
Well, that's exactly right. And I always like to emphasize when I say team first, because I feel like that is in the best interest of the patient.
Right.
And you've heard me say it before, when patients come into an atmosphere where, my philosophy, the team that loves and cares for each other will create an environment where the patient feels loved and cared for. When I talk about team first, I'm obviously talking about culture,
Right.
because I took an oath. I mean, I'm going to do the right thing for the patient. And I basically feel like all humans have this oath. They want to do the right thing for each other. But culturally, if the team feels first, when those patients walk in and say, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but I love how they treat each other. I
Mhm.
love how they treat me. I trust them to do my eye care. And I'm going to tell my friends. And so this idea of team first is actually in the best interest of the patient.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And like my question about the bare minimum, I set you up a little bit with that,
Yeah.
commentary. Just tell me this: what visit is the most important visit when you're going to meet with um, a primary eye care, for example?
Well, I would say that the second, third, fourth, and fifth, I mean, a lot of doctors make that first visit.
Yeah.
And, the person you're visiting, I think when you're leaving, wonders if you'll be back.
Bare minimum question again there, right? Yeah.
Right. This bare minimum thing's bugging me, by the way. I think we should call it BM,
Yeah.
And but I don't want to be a bare minimum guy, you
That's a
know?
that's about the
And
worst thing I've ever heard you say.
yeah. And, but I mean, again, if you want to develop a relationship, there's no such thing as a bare minimum. You do what's necessary. I remember one of the things that I did learn the hard way is I would go in and early in my career and I'd want to talk about, you know, the neat laser study I was doing or the
Right.
neat technology I was using or the new topographer that I had brought to the my region and on and on and on, thinking that's what they wanted to hear. And not that I don't think that they minded hearing that or and they liked learning, but I'll never forget one of my very sage doctors that I worked with that I called as a part of my pseudo board of directors, because there's always these people in your life that bring a lot of wisdom. He told me, "Hey, Jim was talking to me the other day, and he said, I wish Vance would come in sometime and not just teach me, but let me get to know him."
Hmm.
And he really wanted to talk more about where I came from and, my family and how I thought about things and to develop more of a personal relationship. It was really a surprise to me. And it changed my whole delivery that this idea of, hey, get to know me before trying to do
Mhm.
business with me. And so I really took on that philosophy and realized that I'm the same way.
Right.
I want people to kind of get to know me, show they care about me before we just dive into whatever it is professionally we're going to be talking about. And it was a really important moment for me.
Well, and not only that, do they wanna get to know you personally, but they also want you to know them personally, to
Right,
get to know their family and what drives them, and
right,
that's where your philosophies overlap,
right.
right? Now, I would just wanna segue to one more topic, because practice development can mean, collaborative care like we've talked about, but you're also, um, just coming off of being the president of the ASCRS, and one of the stories that I heard about the weekend where you became the president, so this is a little bit more than a year ago. One of the first things you did is, along with some of the leaders of that organization, you went, to the football field-sized auditorium where all of the industry supporters are, and you thanked them,
Yeah.
booth by booth. And all of those industry partners, I talked to a few of them, but to a person that I talked to, they said, nobody's ever done that before. And so practice development, that mindset of just noticing, paying attention, being inquisitive, and being appreciative, it goes a long way, not just in collaborative care, not just with your team, but there's a place where it had never been really exercised before in the same fashion, and was so stunning to people. They remarked on it later.
Wow. It actually really means a lot to me to hear you say that. Um, but I also I really feel like that's what's missing in our world,
Hmm.
and I like to call it the power of you.
Hmm.
And so when I walk into a convenience store and I want to get a cup of coffee or I go into a fancy coffee shop even and I see all these interactions happening somewhat transactionally and I don't see that eye contact and that smile and that kind word. My whole my whole goal is to try to make that person's day who is doing such an amazing job of serving others. And I get up there and I say good morning and I say, "How are you?" And "Are you having a good day?" And I try to make eye contact and give them a smile. And when you do that for someone and you see their flower just blossom,
Hmm.
and you realize the power that's in every one of us to make someone's day, that not only works, professionally, but it works personally. And, you know, I remember you teaching me that one of the most powerful things you can do for someone is help them feel like they matter.
Mm.
And in the process, oh, by the way, it makes you feel like you matter.
Yeah, you matter too.
Right. And
You
so
like
those,
yourself more when
right.
you.
And
Mhm.
so sometimes when you get to higher level things in your profession, for instance, talking with industry, people have a tendency to forget how important those basics are. And so this idea of thanking people or getting to know them before trying to do business with them, the same things that your parents taught you about how to treat each other are things that I never want to let go of. And I just want to always remember the power of you or the power of me, and let's use it for each other.
Well, that's Vance, that's what this whole podcast is about. It's taking those principles that are so innate in us, that our parents taught us, that we somehow lose sight of them and go back, off road, go old school to what
Right.
we've learned and to bring that back into our business life.
And Matt, that's why I like to say, I want to be very progressive when it comes to technology and techniques. And I want to be very old fashioned when it comes to people.
Good wisdom there, Vance. Thanks for just being a part of our discussion about how to develop a practice using principles like this.
Yeah, thank you.